Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the Para X Radio Network. My thanks to Spiral Dance for allowing us to use their music, and tonight's offering was called Magic, and that's what we're going to be talking about for the next hour with my guest, Jason Miller. Now, Jason is an author, a teacher, a sorcerer, who has devoted the last 23 or so years to traveling the globe and studying practical magic in its many forms. He's also the creator of the Strategic Sorcery Training, a one-year bootcamp in practical magic, and is the author of Financial Sorcery, The Sorcerer's Secrets, and Protection and Reversal Magic, as well as the Advanced Planetary Magic Chapbook and the Strategic Sorcery blog. And tonight we're going to be talking about his new book, Sex, Sorcery, and Spirit, The Secrets of Erotic Magic. And I'm very happy that he's here with us tonight. So Jason, welcome.
Hi, how are you, Marla?
I'm good. I'm excited to get into this. This is some really interesting stuff. But for people who may not be aware or may have the wrong idea about it, what is sexual sorcery and how can it enhance our magical workings?
Well, simply put, the sexual act is a magical act and a primordial act. The orgasm, I should say, is a primordial experience. Mm-hmm. And rather than doing magic to find sexual partners, which is, of course, a long-standing part of sorcery, sex itself can be a tool used in both magic and spirituality, mm-hmm. And has been so for thousands of years.
Mm-hmm. Now, some people... Oh, go ahead.
No. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that some people say that this type of magic is much stronger than other types. It's taking the intent we normally put into our magic to the next level, in a sense. Correct?
Well, it does. It does take it to the next level. It can be very potent. That said, sometimes there's a bit more of a reputation around it than is warranted. You know, people make all kinds of claims for that, through sexual magic we can produce the elixir of life that will keep us young and alive forever. Mm-hmm. And, this is demonstrably not the case. Aleister Crowley wrote about sex magic this way, and his ashes are currently underneath a tree at a dairy farm in New Jersey. So it didn't work out that well for him. So sometimes people, because there is so much emotion around sex, there's so much history of both titillation and vilification of sex. People put a lot of stock into it as far as like being the most powerful form of magic. And I don't know if that is the case. What I can attest to, though, is it is a powerful tool in both practical magic and most especially in spiritual practices.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned Aleister Crowley, and your introduction to sexual sorcery began with Donald Michael Craig and Aleister Crowley both. Now, that's a dynamic duo, and you started pretty young at it, huh?
Teenager,
right?
I did. I read Donald Michael Craig's Modern Magic while I was still in high school. It was recommended to me by a teacher in that school who took a chance in not directly mentoring, but at least steering my studies. I worked my way through sex magic in the Craig book once I was old enough to do so. And then I eventually joined the OTO, which is the sex magical order that Aleister Crowley took over for a short time in the early 20th century. And it's he is a little bit synonymous with sex magic, but too much so. You'll notice in the rest of the book, I don't talk a whole lot about him.
Right.
And that's because Aleister Crowley, and in fact, everything in occultism that happened in the late 1800s, early 1900s, is sort of exercises too much gravity. People think about it too much. Like they just keep going back and back and back. And they ignore better things that have come out since, and they ignore things that have happened earlier in favor of this. So, for instance, people will still to this day want to learn about Tantra in the East and turn to Aleister Crowley or what people wrote in German sex magical lodges, even though we now have tantric masters from India and Tibet that come over and give fairly open teachings of the authentic thing that these folks would have, given their left nut to get a hold of.
No pun intended, right?
No pun.
Well, let's talk, since you explained this so well in the book's introduction, let's explain to everyone what the book is not before getting into the purpose of the book.
Okay. Well, the book is not for getting laid. First of all, that's pretty much the one thing I wanted to make clear, because I'll eventually do a book about love attracting magic.
Mm-hmm.
But this is not that book. This assumes that, you either have a sexual partner or you practice solo, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
So that's number one. The book is also not a sort of guide to having sex for 7 hours or how to please your lover the best. I think that there are plenty of techniques in the book that people can pick up on, but the goal of the book is not to be a better lover and recapture your libido. It's a book meant to take advantage of the energies of sex and use it for both practical magic and spiritual illumination.
Mm-hmm. And some people may be disappointed, but there are no 8x10 glossies in the book either.
No. Not of me, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because I was reading that, and I didn't really realize this, but it wasn't an easy book for you to write because the teachings on sexual magic, both Eastern and Western, you say, have been shrouded in secrecy, alchemical codes, and twilight language. And then you unearthed a lot of what was hidden and wrote this so it could be spoken of openly and plainly. Now, why do you think it was hidden? Was it morally, not looked at, or all those people that would have said that and go, yeah, we know, that's how witches are. Yep, that kind of thing, pointing fingers. Why do you think it was hidden for so many years?
Well, I mean, they're in the East, it was a little more open than in the West. In Tibet, there were fairly open writings about Kama Mudra practices, the tantric sex magic practices.
Mm-hmm.
In the West, we're a little more prudish about it. And of course, we have the church sort of vilifying sexuality and making it sinful for anything other than procreation. So the important thing is that, you know, these things were spoken of in hushed terms. And even after the Enlightenment and so on, you talking about it openly would just be too much. You know, I even as early as the early part of the 20th century, you know, to speak openly about this kind of thing would be scandalous. Whereas today, not that, you know, a very short time after that period, you know, now we live in the world of two girls, one cup. So treating this as if it's a shocking sexual practice is just silly. You know, I mean, you can turn on HBO and see things 100 times more shocking than the stuff in the book. So that is the one thing that you know, sex gets vilified as evil, passion, control. You know, it's easy to control people if you can control their sexual urges. This is why when you hear about cults and things like that are particularly manipulative, they're always in the sexual practices of the acolytes in the cult. They always are trying, you know, the cult leader is arranging sex between people and telling some people they can and can't have sex, because this is a form of mind control. So, you know, people have sought to have this control. People have sought to shame those who had sex openly. People have you know, all kinds of bugaboos about sex, but it just would not be possible to write a book like this before, you know, even the 1960s.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And some people that are listening now are probably rolling their eyes too, or blushing.
Because, sure.
You know.
Yeah. You know, I mean, I have been told as recently as a couple of years ago, you know, somebody had a very well-known occultist, and I won't, you know, I won't divulge a name because I don't want to embarrass anybody, but we were talking about sex magic, and she was just like, oh, you know, all that is just an excuse for people to have sex.
Oh, good.
And I was just like, when have people ever needed an excuse to have sex? Like, really? Like an excuse to have sex? No, it's, you know, maybe it's an excuse to do magic. So, you know, that kind of attitude is still around. And in the East, you know, I don't mean to paint the East like it's just been wild and open there. You know, while Tibet has had writings about sexual, spiritual practices within Buddhism, and certainly it's been there in Hinduism, these are on the fringe. And, you know, monks in Tibet would stress sutra for people, and then even in the context of tantra, they would tell people to have visualized consorts that they have sex with, not actual ones, or that the best and highest people could accomplish their practices with a visualized partner, and only low people who are ignorant need a physical sex partner. So, you know, I guess I fall into that camp.
I think we all do. You know, there are some, and people might be surprised to hear this, but there are some very real dangers involved practicing it. Some people maybe 100 years ago would think some of the stuff that we don't think at all is dangerous now would have happened back then. But having read through the chapter on the perils of passion, it seems to me that it's more like, it's not dangerous in the sense that it's dangerous, but that common sense is like the key to bypassing some stuff, you know, both mental and physical. But that being said, I know there's some people who are, kind of like sitting there thinking, well, what kind of possible dangers could crop up?
Well, this is the interesting thing about magic is that very few people look at the dangers of magic or occultism in general with anything close to just a common sense or even killed attitude. You have people screaming that to do anything wrong, even slightly, is dangerous. If you say the words of the spell wrong, or if you do something without a triple protective circle, then you're going to get gobbled up, and and stuff like this. So it's just like they paralyze themselves into inaction because they're afraid of doing something wrong, or a spell that reverses upon them and quote unquote backfires. Ergo, it's easier to do nothing. Or negative karma from affecting your will upon another or something like that. And then you have other people that are like, oh, well, all that stuff is bunk. Magic is not dangerous at all. We can just do whatever, and the spirits aren't ever dangerous. And this sort of, fantasy, everything is sweetness and light and fluff and fantasy.
Uh-huh.
But of course, it's much more like driving a car. If we get behind the wheel of a car and we think, oh my God, it's so dangerous, so many people die every year from car accidents, then we're never going to get anywhere. We're not going to drive. So we have to put but if we think, oh, there's never any danger from driving a car, I can just do whatever the hell I want, then we're going to cause a major accident. Mm-hmm. So we just have to get behind the wheel and think, well, the danger is not very, very high. It's certainly worth taking the car out for a spin, and as long as we take some common sense precautions. And it's the same thing with sexual magic. Sexual magic has a particular danger of amping up the passions of the body, the emotions, turning the volume up. And this is the same danger that exists in Kundalini yoga and Tumo and any serious work that increases the flow of energy in the body. Mm-hmm. Because what happens is that it has benefit because it turns the volume up on all the good stuff, on the true will and all this other stuff. But it also turns the volume up on everything else. Mm-hmm. So, yes, your passion can be passion for enlightenment, and the base of all emotion is energy that can be transformed, which is the whole basis of Tantra. But if you don't purify at all, if you don't do any protective practices, then you can fall into just having all of your emotions, the volume turned up. So you get angry easier and fiery about everything, not just sex. So that's one of the dangers. Other dangers are, of course, the mind control and people, sexual vampires and things like this are possible, but not often. The biggest one is is the possibility of passions run amok.
Mm-hmm. See, now I would think in going through some of this that one of the things that would be the hardest about it, especially when you're using sigils and trying to focus, and then that moment of orgasm and you're supposed to focus on that, and people are going, well, how can I focus on that when, my body is exploding, kind of thing. That would actually probably be the most confounding thing to a lot of people, right?
Well, that's one of the ways that writers in the West have kind of missed the point. The point is not to hold something in your conscious mind at the moment of orgasm. The point is to have a direction for that energy to go. And this is something too where writers, again, I would, I would love, especially for sex magic, to escape the gravity of the Victorian era, of the 1800s and early 1900s, where people like Pascal Beverly Randolph wrote about the need to extinguish passions for this sort of passionless sex. And that's no. No. That defeats the whole point. Then what are you doing, really, if you're going to, extinguish the passions? It doesn't make any sense at all. Right. Yes, my solution is always, you want to be looking at this sigil if you're doing that particular kind of sex magic. Mm-hmm. It would be great to be looking at this sigil at the moment of orgasm. So then the point is to not have the sigil painted like on the wall. The point then is to, use some body paint it all over your partner, so that, whether you're looking at his or her chest or face or back or rump or whatever, it's right there.
Exactly.
So that way you don't have to worry about it. You're immersed in it. And then, of course, you can do these invocations to channel deity and so on, and then throw yourself passionately into the lovemaking, in which case the whole goal then is about absorbing yourself and losing yourself in this wave of orgasm, not like stopping screwing long enough to go, okay, I've got to remember that I am Thor. I look like, this guy with a hammer, and she is Frigga, not like that. No. You want to hold divine pride and engage in what you're doing fully, more fully than ever.
Mm-hmm. That's a good thought. Now, as with other spell work, we often call in spirits and gods, goddesses to assist us, and the same goes for sexual sorcery. And one chapter in the book, called Raising Your Spirits, is about sex for and with angels, demons, gods, spirits. And you begin the chapter by saying that the sex act itself attracts spirits to its vortex. It gives them flesh and eventually bears them into manifestation. So it's no wonder that there are several categories of sex magic devoted to spirit communication, conjuration, and communication. So now that we've scared a few people from ever wanting to have sex again, lest they open a portal, let's talk a little bit more about this.
Well, in ancient Greece, no woman was safe from Zeus. He just, the head god would just run around screwing everyone in sight and popping out little demigod babies all over Greece. Mm-hmm. There's a cartoon now where it shows Zeus having sex with like all these women, and then Zeus having sex with all these men, and then finally Zeus sees like a bull, and then you see the Minotaur. That's like, this idea that obviously the idea that sex attracts spirits. This is, how many people believe that souls become incarnated, that they are attracted by the sexual rite, and then people sort of absorb into that and then become incarnated. Mm-hmm. This is certainly an idea in Tantra as well as in the West. And so, it's then not too big of a jump for people to claim to have sexual relations with spiritual beings, be they gods, angels, or God himself in at least one case that spawned a rather large religion. So, the sort of inappropriately touched by an angel idea has been around for a long time. And you can seek that out if it doesn't happen naturally. Obviously, it happens to some people just as a psychic experience that they're sought out by beings from the other side. But likewise, there are ways that you can attract angelic and spiritual lovers to yourself and get lost in this rapture.
And I've got a question from Chad along those lines. What happens if you get a child from that spirit, angel, or demon?
Well, doesn't happen very often. But it very well could be if such a thing were to truly happen, where there's no physical father, which I don't believe happens at all, personally. But if it did, then history would teach us that person would be a person of great renown. They would be a person of charisma, or a person who fully represented whatever spiritual power that spirit represented. And this is where the moonchild idea comes in, the homunculus, the alchemists that tried to create life essentially by ensouling an elemental or another type of spirit instead of a human spirit into the baby. And there's lots of examples of this, even going right up to the famous episode of L. Ron Hubbard and Jack Parsons trying to create a moonchild back in the 50s.
Mm-hmm. Well, chapter 9 did get me really hard with the homunculus because it kind of made the way you wrote it. It was kind of creepy, and for those who are not sure what we're talking about, that chapter discusses sexual methods for creating spirit beings or artificial spirits that can act as familiars and helpers, which in of itself doesn't sound so horrific. But then there are the homunculi, if I'm saying that right, and you even said in the book it kind of pains you a little bit to talk about them. But knowing me a little bit as you do, you got to figure I had to bring that up. I mean, that was just like,
at the end, I certainly sexual practices to create artificial spirits and things like this. I mean, that is harmless enough. But then at the end of the chapter, I do go into the ways that people have laid out for exactly what I just said, that for a spirit to overtake a pregnancy, and as I think I wrote I started the chapter that I would really like not to have to talk about this. Believe me, I would really, really not like to talk about it, because I don't want to hear of anyone who reads this book doing this.
Right. Yeah.
But it would be silly to have a book about sexual alchemy and not have it covered. So, there it is. That said, there's not exactly a step-by-step ritual.
No, thank goodness for that, because we got enough crazy people in this world. We don't need, other things coming up and joining them in force. That wouldn't be a good thing. Again, we were talking about common sense, and common sense would be not to go ahead and do that. And you talk about taking magic to the next level by incorporating it into our workings, and there will be those who say, well, they can't do it because they don't have a partner. Now, as you explained, and I think this is important, it's an issue that you have a whole chapter devoted to called Flying Solo, or that's what it's about. Kind of reminds me of the Seinfeld episode, being the master of your own domain. But
Well, it was either Flying Solo or Pamela Henderson. So
oh, jeez. I think you made the right choice. Yeah.
Good.
Well,
Thank you.
yeah. That was really good. But, we need to talk about that for a minute. But the one thing that is probably not a good thing about using magic in that way and being alone is looking for a partner from another realm to replace a real live person that could potentially be there. That's another little common sense thing. You don't want to invite, incubus, succubus, whoever, to come knocking at your door and causing a problem, right?
Yeah, that would be, that would be the height of sad, sad loneliness. Yeah, that would be terrible. And unfortunately, something that does happen. I have been doing a little bit of further research on artificial spirits and tulpas, which is misnamed. There's no such thing as a tulpa in that sense within Tibetan Buddhism, but that fight's lost. We're calling them tulpas. And communities of people that are creating these artificial spirits just out of their minds. This is an old practice, but now people are sort of making tulpas that they're claiming to have, sexual relations with, and you can find things like this on Reddit, and disturbing doesn't even begin to characterize some of it. And again, it is that, to replace the physical partner. It's a poor replacement.
That's a good way of putting it, yeah.
It is a poor replacement. That said, mine is not to judge. People have a lot of problems in this life, and everyone deserves love somewhere, somehow. So I am not qualified or in a position to condemn anyone, but I would say that to give up the search for a human partner in favor of a succubus or incubus is almost always going to be a bad choice.
That's very diplomatic of you. Because I would have.
You'll look back on your life later and go, that's where things started to go wrong.
Yeah, or you might not have a life to look back on after a while, depending on what a great job you did calling in whoever it might be. Right.
Yeah.
All right, but
Certainly possible.
But flying solo, I like this terminology, is equally as effective as doing it with a partner, right?
No.
No. All right. Well, okay. Now we're going
for
back
some
to the
things, yes, and for some things, no. And
okay.
See, this is where people have oversimplified as if sex magic is just one thing. Mm-hmm. It's not one thing. There are many different rites. Some of those rites depend upon meditating and sort of riding the primordial wave of the orgasm. That moment that the orgasm happens that is ego shattering, that has caused the French to call it le petit mort, or little death.
Right. Mm-hmm.
In which case, yes, then it can be just as effective to do it alone. And you can do it alone. But there are other rites that involve the working and circulation of energy and the mutual absorption of energies of the other, of the partner. In which case, obviously, you can't really do that alone. Mm-hmm. So there, it's not only not as effective, it's just not possible. There are sorceress rites where I would definitely say that it is not as effective doing it yourself as it is doing it um, doing it with a partner, having that combined energy, that yin yang energy there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then of course there are other rites that we get into that actually involve the fluids, some of which you only need the one fluid for, but some of which are based upon the combined fluids. And there not only is the presence of a partner, but the combination of male and female sexual fluids important. So it's about what exactly you're doing, what exactly you're trying to accomplish. And there is also a magic of celibacy, of focusing sexual energy inward and transforming it within, in which case a partner is not even desirable.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. So what is inner fire practice?
Inner fire practice is really the key to the whole thing. And it's, in Western writings, they write about heating the elixir. And it's been interpreted as simply having sex for longer and longer periods of time. This is heating it. But that, in the East, that is not the case. They also speak of heating the elixir and the alchemy of heat, sublimation. But there, the process is done through internal energy work, through breath work, and focusing the mind in certain ways that creates a pressure in the central channel of the body. If you're familiar with yoga, you'll know the central channel and the side channel. So there are ways to create pressure and fire in this central channel that creates this spiritual heat. And if you're very adept at it, it creates a physical heat. There are, yogis that, for instance, have done tumo, which is the Tibetan version of this, have been studied at universities and have gotten their internal core body temperature up to 117 degrees.
Wow.
Now, you don't have to be that adept at it. That level of mastery takes hours of practice and lots of physical mastery of some fairly strenuous physical exercises called chokors. But you can still practice inner heat yoga and inner heat practice, and it's transforming. Anyone that does it seriously for a few weeks will see the difference and have experiences that they cannot deny. There is no notion that it is fantasy. You will feel this inner heat, this descending bliss, and it's that combination of energy and bliss that then you bring into the sex act and use it as fuel.
Well, talking about fuel, and I'm just thinking back. There's a lot in the book about the elixir, and you've mentioned that before earlier on. But the subhead of that chapter is called "The Sorcery of Sexual Fluids." So there are many ways to use it, to utilize it. Different fluids, separate together. All turn into one magic elixir, which is really simplifying it like crazy, right?
Well, it is and it isn't. I mean, there are complex ways of arriving at it, depending on what you're looking at it. But at its base, yeah, it is the combined sexual fluids of two people that have dedicated the rite, that have quote unquote cooked it. In other words, not just having sex for 2.5 minutes, but done it in a sacred and alchemical way. This is said to produce a powerful elixir, the combined sexual fluid, that people have thought confers longevity, confers magical powers, and can be used in healing and all kinds of things. But not just externally, internally as well. The physical fluids are the physical manifestation of the spiritual fluids. So they can get absorbed, directly. They combine during the sex act and then they get reabsorbed by the partners. But each one is changed because it has been combined with the other polarity.
Mm-hmm. And, people have been talking for years and thousands of years or hundreds of years, written history, about using certain fluids in certain spells. I mean, in witches' bottles, they have used that. Women in love spells way back when have used theirs to, cook up a nice meal with it, for some man that they were attracting, kind of thing. I mean, it's nothing new. It's just probably, talked about a little bit more now. But I guess people don't know the history of a lot of these things and how far it actually goes back and how it's changed or improved or maybe stayed the same in some instances over the millennium.
Yeah, in the case of witches, and then there's old conjure work where you would maybe make a stake that's cut to the size of your man's staff, and then insert it and coat it with the fluids, and then cook it up and feed it to him, as a way to get him to be true and to hang around.
Exactly.
That's pretty straight sympathetic magic. Right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, while it gets frowned on, in a lot of, today's quarters as being manipulative, and who would want a love relationship based on, that level of trickery and manipulation. I always point out that it is fairly recent that women are financially independent, and that a lot of these spells for women to keep men from wandering are not so much to jealously guard the person that they're in love with, although that is certainly a factor, but is also there because their entire financial livelihood depends upon their husband. So if he wanders off with some young chickie and leaves you high and dry with the kid, you're screwed. So the magic there is self-preservation and entirely understandable.
Mm-hmm. Now, how are sex magic and divination intertwined? Because some people probably can't fathom the two together.
Well, I don't really write very much about sex magic and divination, but in terms of visions, it's important. So, not for instance, not divination as far as like tarot cards and things like that, but sex magic. The orgasm is again this moment where the ego shatters, and there's a moment of openness, and you can pattern how you want this energy to either flow or to reassemble itself after this ego-shattering orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are rites where people have sex with the intent of then looking into the scrying mirror and seeing something, or closing their eyes and riding that wave after the orgasm back to sort of normal consciousness to try and glimpse a vision of something or a message from spirit. These are effective rites. I've done some of them myself, and it is an interesting way of seeing. And then this is also something that people have used sensory deprivation for. So then we start to drift into things that would normally be under the dominion of like fetishism and kink, that to further lessen the external stimuli, you might use blindfolds and earplugs and, bonding and so on to further drive it as an inward experience.
All right, because I had, honestly, the very simplistic way, I'm talking about divination, I'm thinking about, okay, people read tea leaves. People read water droplets, and then I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe that's possible, but you know what I'm saying.
It's certainly possible. With divination, while some systems certainly do have more of a spirit, more of an anima behind it than others, just like even within tarot, certain decks have a certain spirit to them, and certain ones have less, and then some of them are just dead because they were only ever meant to be like little artsy things. All that's really necessary for a divination system is for the magician to link up with a spiritual power, declare that this is how they are going to read things to essentially create a system, and then ask for spirit to manifest its wisdom through that system.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you want to come up with a system of reading the white drops, then something like that is entirely possible.
Right.
I'm good.
Well, use your imagination. I mean, nothing is carved in stone, right? So,
No,
yeah.
not in stone.
Not in stone, no. Now, one of the good things is, well, many good things about the book, but there are 4 rites of sexual sorcery at the end of the book, which are not imperative to achieve good results overall, but, sometimes rituals are good. They formalize the works, or some people really, get more out of it. So I think that's really, really a good thing to have in there. And they're very long, and I love ritual in general. So that's like perfect. But now the $64,000 question, because time is ticking away, is everyone well suited to practice sexual sorcery, or are there some that should kind of look the other way and just move on? And I'm not just talking about the BDSM, which we did not get into and wish we had time for.
No, here again we get into the situation where I don't want to be sitting in the place of judgment. I would never walk up to somebody and say, this is good for you, or this is not good for you, unless I knew their situation very intimately. Mm-hmm. That said, if people have sexual problems, whether it's ED or something else, then this is not going to solve that problem for you. Sometimes people look to magic as something that you do, to help fix your ego and help fix, the psychological problems, as opposed to something that you should do after you fix those things. So in this case, having a normal and healthy sex life, and by normal I don't mean heteronormative at all. Mm-hmm. The book is very clear that there are rites that can be done by anyone in any combination of sexual orientation, and then there are rites that are specific not only to hetero orientation, but there are rites that are specific to homosexual orientation as well. We shouldn't paint everything with a bland brush. Like I said, it's been too long where people talk about sex magic as if it is just one thing. It's not. It's many, many, many things. It's a whole category of rights. So our people, certainly anyone that would have unhealthy passions driven further by it. So people that would, get excited by children or something like that, non-consensual scenarios. If they're teetering on the edge, then they don't want to mess with something that would push them over the edge. But that's really all that I can think of. People that for whatever reason can't have a healthy sex life, or people that would be pushed into things that are, criminal.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, we've got about 2 minutes, so I want, before we get cut off, where can people find out about you, your appearances, get your books, and everything else that you're up to?
Well, you can find about me and my appearances at strategicsorcery.net. That is where you'll find my blog and a website that's in a little bit of a need of an update, but the blog is always updated. And I am on Facebook as Jason Miller. So you can definitely find me easy enough. And then the books, I always tell people that if you can get the book at your local occult bookstore or your local independent bookstore, then that is, that warms the cockles of my heart. I would love for people to get the book that way. If not, then it is available both on the shelf at Barnes & Noble and online at both Amazon and barnesandnoble.com, as well as other distributors. So it's a widely distributed book. I don't sell the book directly from my website. So
okay, well, people can find it a lot of places, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
Jason, thank you so much for joining me. Great show. Probably have you back, because I'm probably going to get 50,000 questions after the fact, and so we might have to do a sequel to this after you get through with all the other ones. And also, if you stay on the line for just a minute after we get through, we'll thank you politely. And I want to thank everybody else for listening in tonight. And until next time, everybody, blessed be, and merry meet it again. Good night.
Blessed be.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at the same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2013. Moonlight Hall by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.